And today we are talking about the things that actually get in the way of preventing businesses from being able to sell, from being able to not just scale, not just prepare their business for succession, but really we're focusing today on the sale process and how to successfully exit your business. And I can think of nobody better than Bennett, president of Pando Consulting Group. Bennett Lebowitz is your last name. Bennett, what you do is you really, really dive deep with organizations and help them hone in their financials, their operational aspects that are necessary to it's a transformation beyond just the financial. I think a lot of times when people think about making my business exit ready, they think about, okay, financially, where do we need to be in order to be stable, to have the reports necessary to prove to the acquiring company, we're a safe bet, but it's operational too. And so I'm excited to have you join us today because I think a lot of trades businesses are asking this question, whether they're doing so intentionally or cognitively or consciously perhaps, but they really are wondering, how do I prepare my business for exit? So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's good to talk to you again. Good to see you again. Enjoyed our conversation last week. And so really thankful that you asked me to come back on. And I have an incredible passion for this. I think there is just a lot of unknowns around taking a company to market and being successful in that exit and what that really looks like. And so, yeah, we want to be able to have an honest conversation and just educate about the realities of what it looks like to go to market, but also where we can help improve your company's positioning when they actually decide to go to market. We are not here to tell you when to sell or how to sell. We're telling you that we want to make sure that you're always transaction ready. So when it's the right time for you and your company to sell, that you're positioned going to market from a mindset of strength, defensibility, and really understanding the value you're providing to an acquirer.
Let's dive into that. You said strength, defensibility, and yes. What was the last one?
Just positioning the value. Sure. Yeah, I think that's really important.
Good. I love to, when you're talking about being positioned from a place of strength, how do you define a strong company?
I think one that understands the value to a potential buyer, but also understanding that the success of their business does not solely rely on their shoulders or their efforts. And so they have brought in management that can take on a lot of the day-to-day operations, allowing the owner to really think strategically around their business and driving the ship towards the destination that they're actually trying to achieve and actually land at. And I think that also looking at their operations and not being comfortable and complacent, but also pushing constantly towards advancement, looking at technology. Obviously, AI is an incredible opportunity to implement within your organization, but also being honest and not just pulling the wool over your eyes and saying that everything is good inside your business, and looking at those blind spots to really be able to make sure that you shore up those gaps. Because when a buyer comes in to look at your business, that due diligence process is created so a buyer knows exactly what they are acquiring. And so they look at every aspect of your company, financially, operationally, from a legal standpoint, from a client concentration standpoint, from an owner reliance standpoint. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And when you're running a business day to day, those are not things that are necessarily priorities, right, to continue the business, but they become a major priority when you position your company to actually sell.
Good. So I'm just going to do a quick recap because each one of those is so important. You're looking at so kind of under the umbrella of a strong company. And I'm sure some of these will probably move on to, we were talking about strength, defensibility, and value. But a strong company under that umbrella is really looking at the management side, which actually lends, I think, to what you were saying about kind of like the owner reliance, like how much of the company is solely predicated on the owner versus how much is actually diversified through management and kind of cascading down where it's the control, to your point, reliance. Like I love that word, owner reliance. How much is actually relying on you versus how much can operate without you? And I think so often we find ego can kind of get involved and intertwined with that because it makes us feel good to have people rely on us. But not just for our sake, but for the sake of the business and potentially being able to sell if that is your goal. Not having the business rely on you is actually like, look forward to the future. What do you want? If you want to grow in any way, that diversification of reliance and also power is going to be necessary. And they go hand in hand. Like, in terms of everything resting on you, you also have all the power, but you also are really prevented by your own human capabilities and constraints, like human constraints. You have to sleep, unfortunately. You know what I mean? So,
Well, it's also, we're not telling you to not have control of your company. What we're talking about is
right.
having someone's got to direct where the company's going. And so if you are constantly bogged down in the day-to-day tactical decisions of your company, no one's looking beyond the horizon, right? Nobody's looking 3, 5, 10 years out and saying, where do we want to be? There's a lot of different systems out there that help you do that, but to actually implement it within your organization, there has to be somebody who's doing that. And so if
Mm,
you look at that kind of hierarchy of the org chart, you have the CEO, which is really the visionary. The
yeah.
COO should really be that tactical technician that is handling the day-to-day opportunities, but also the day-to-day facilitation of what you do as a business. And then, of course, the CFO is looking at not only the financials, but forecasting, budgeting, making sure you're on track, looking at things that are more forward looking versus rearward looking. And if you're tactical, you're typically in the moment and you are not necessarily looking at what's going to happen tomorrow. And I think
Yes.
that's something that a buyer wants to understand, like, hey, we're not buying it for the growth today, we're buying it for the growth of the future. And if you don't know what that looks like, then how are we going to know what that looks like?
So, so good, which lends to that second point. Well, wasn't necessarily second in your order, but going to the financial side. I just had this thought as you were talking, be honest, looking at those blind spots and the gaps. Do your own due diligence. Don't wait until it's time to sell. And I think that that's the number one thing that you and your organization does, is that it's effectively preparing you all to always be transaction ready, to that point of like, we may not actually sell for the next few years, but the goal is that, I mean, it helps us as a business to actually do our own due diligence. So I just wonder, Bennett, how many people do you work with where it's like, hey, help us get transaction ready, and we're actually not going to be ready to sell maybe ever, but the things we would put in place for a potential buyer actually should be in place regardless.
Right. Yeah, that's what we tell our clients. Nothing we're going to do is negatively impact your company.
Yeah.
It's only going to make you more valuable, more profitable, more efficient. It's going to allow the ownership to have more control over their time and where they're spending their energy in the company. So we've never had a company where they've gone through our process and they're like, this was not beneficial for my company. What actually ends up happening is they find joy running their company again. They're not under that constant pressure of putting out fires every single day. They're not reactive. They built systems and put those in place to allow things to happen organically. They have a team to take responsibilities off the shareholders' plate. And so they're having fun again, right? And so they don't want to necessarily sell. And what I always tell people is always best to sell your company when you're the most excited about your company, not when you're
Mm,
selling out of a position of pain. And so if you're excited, then a buyer is going to be that much more excited about looking at your company. And actually, you're going to also attract opportunities at that point because your company is running on all cylinders. Buyer representatives are looking for companies like that all the time. And so when you hit that level, there's going to be people calling, and it's not
right.
just coincidental that that takes place.
So good. I love that. Honestly, it's rather anticlimactic in one sense to sell when you really love it. Because to your point, you are going to be attracting, what we're putting out, that excitement, that vision, that energy surrounding the business. We're going to attract that right back to us. And isn't that the law of attraction?
Yes.
So if we're waiting until we start hating the business, that's probably
Right.
actually going to show up in our conversations. It's going to show up with our team as well. You know, I've the more I've engaged with executives and leadership level, the more I realize how much leadership really is relational. And so if we're effectively burnt out, if we're coming from that point of pain or wanting to get out, it's going to cascade down into every single fraction of our business.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't hide it, right? I mean, this
Right.
is so much of the owner's identity is tied into the business. So when they're under stress, the business is under stress. When they're excited about the business is moving in the right direction. And it's a direct reflection of where you are in your life as an owner, as a shareholder.
Yes.
And the personal life and the business life are so closely tied to each other. There's no way to disconnect from that wholly. So when things
Mm,
are good in both places, it really does elevate the excitement around the business, but also the growth around the business.
right. I'd love to dig into that, you know, in terms of what constitutes a strong company. We're talking about having really solid managers in place, having clarity around the CEO role, the COO role, the CFO role. I got to tell you, I think a lot of CEOs wear the COO hat,
Of course.
especially if they're smaller. You know,
Yeah.
they're not actually, before we got on here, kind of in the green room, we were talking about the CEO of Jiffy Lube, who built it to what it is today. And the advice he gave me was take 8 hours every week, every other week, to just effectively be creative and like don't have anything to do. Just be during that time, because then you can think and you can really allow for organic thought to come, because you're not sitting down with your task list, but you can really be creative around the problems and also be creative around the future. And so that's, man, you and I were like lamenting over, we gotta we gotta make sure that we're
A
creating
little
time
work
for
on
this.
that.
Yeah. But really that is the role of the CEO, to be the visionary, to be the person who sees and can really look ahead and also be preventative as well, because they're able to see the problems coming from miles away. And so to this point around identity, making sure that we can become owners and CEOs who are in the role of visionary, sure, maybe involved to an extent in the day to day, but like, how do you advise owners to divorce identity so that they can take that bird's eye level view, be aware of what's the honest to God truth? Look, here are some gaps. This is where we're going. Here are gaps. Here's what's preventing growth, and not have it be egotistical in the sense of, ego is actually blinding us from being able to see the truth or being able to allow for us to view the business as something other than you and me.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the people who engage us want that objectivity, right? They are
Mm,
too inside the business to really have a true understanding of where the gaps exist. And so what we tell our clients is we're going to pressure test your company. We want to understand when the pressure is applied, aka diligence is applied to your company, what's going to be uncovered? What is the buyer going to see? And so we
right.
have this great opportunity ahead of that point to run a company through the exact same process
Mm,
so that the owner can then see the impact not only on the value of the business, but their likelihood of actually selling the business. 70 to 80% of companies that go to market do not sell. That is a staggering number. So no company that I've ever talked to ever puts themselves in that 70 to 80%. They
yes.
always throw themselves in the 20% that's going to sell. And that's
Oh,
great. But until you've gone through that process, you really don't know if that's a true statement or not. And so we are human beings and emotional creatures, and we react to pain. And everybody has their specific pain points. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's the
mm,
ability to not leave a legacy, sometimes it's I just need to get out from underneath the business. And so if
right,
we can highlight where the pain points are, then they're more likely to implement the things that we're asking them to implement, because there's a direct correlation between what we are saying is an issue here and what that's going to look like when you actually try to sell your company. And
right,
so you have the decision. We assess, but ultimately it's the owner's decision on whether or not they want to implement these changes, which is a big lift. And we don't underestimate that. They're already overworked, they're stressed. We're not trying to add more to their plate. but there is a process, right? And so there's short-term pain for long-term gain. And, you either stay in that pain throughout and endure it all the way through, or you just get through it as quickly as possible so you can get on the other side of that and really see the fruits of your labor and what your company is really able to accomplish, whether that be through a sale or just through growth itself and really scaling something that has
Right.
support and structure to really carry that growth forward.
The support and structure to carry it forward. So let's go to the operations side, because
Sure.
that was number two. You, in terms of what kind of defines a strong company, you said the management of it, the operations of it. Not being comfortable and complacent, but also looking at the technology. How do we need to change? What are the structures and systems we need to put in place? So I'd love to lean into that. Are there specific operational tactics, I guess, that have almost like a rinse and repeat ability, depending on size?
It's funny. We have companies that are, in $80 million that have no documented SOPs throughout all the departments. And we have, sub $10 million companies that are very well documented. So size doesn't necessarily equate to the level of implementation around SOPs.
Mm,
But it's the intentionality once again. So it's
yeah.
what we want to do is look at every department that you have within your organization, understand what the documented SOPs look like,
Mm,
but also how often are you evaluating these? Do you do any kind of after action review, right? Where something happens, you sit down as a collective, you look at your SOPs, you see if anything
mm,
in there caused or prevented that issue from being a prolonged issue. And then if not, how do we revise that to update it to make sure that this is not a recurring problem? That,
right.
okay, we found there was a problem. Now we shored that up. And now moving forward, anybody who sits in that seat knows what to do in that situation. Most companies are very reactive. They don't do that, but they keep putting out the same fire over and over again. And
Mm,
so that clogs up the pipeline of just being able to implement what their core duties are within the organization, but it also strangles the bandwidth, right? How much more can they handle, especially when growth is applied to that? It SOPs are really that blueprint to success within your organization. And that also leads into training, that also leads into hiring, that also leads into where gaps exist within roles and responsibilities. It looks at, do you have the right people in the right seats? It could be that, employee A keeps running into this issue. And so you're actually looking at, potential firing that individual, but really,
right.
it's not, they were never set up to succeed. It was the system that they went into that was failed, not them. So giving them a true sense of ownership of that role and responsibility, but also giving them the tactical elements that allow them to be successful in that role. That's really, really important. And it's one of the easiest things for a buyer to come in, evaluate, and understand that this is an issue.
Mm, so good. So good. I want to move to the defensibility side of things.
Sure.
Because in so many ways these probably overlap, but I'd love to hear kind of your definition of what does it look like to have a business that really is. I just love this concept of we've effectively put up our defense. We're operating from a place of defense, and obviously you're strong and you're going after your vision, but we're defensible. We've got a line of protection. What does that mean?
Well, anybody who saw the last Super Bowl knows defenses win the game, and having a strong defense is it's a priority. It's not a luxury. And so when somebody's coming in and asking you questions and very specific questions around your organization, you have to be able to provide an answer, but you have to defend that answer, whether through documentation or through some kind of projection and forecasting that if it's a financial question that they are able to defend. That's why we have quality of earnings. We want to make sure that the information that's on your P&L and balance sheet actually tie in correctly through your general ledger and your chart of accounts. And so all of these things are really crucial to the success that a seller will inevitably run into during due diligence, but they've never gone through this process before. They look at their P&L, they're profitable, they feel like everything's running on all cylinders. They have great support systems. The management is doing everything they need to do, but that's under their lens of being an owner and not being objective to what a buyer is going to come in and ask. And so, one, if you can't even answer the question clearly, then there's no defensibility around it. But even if you can, if it's not documented and there's a pathway of showing, hey, we've been looking at this for the last several years. And so when you're asking, how do we know this? It's because we've been tracking it for years and years.
Right.
And some companies do a really good job of that, and some companies never look at it at all. And so you can't
Mm,
defend that statement unless you have the data to back it up. And that's what we want to be able to build. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the time for that. If somebody wants to come to us and say, we want to sell in 12 months, it's kind of triage, right? We're going in, we're assessing, we're looking at where the biggest gaps are and things that we know are going to be an issue in due diligence. And we try to shore up
mm,
those gaps as quickly as possible. But if we have 3 to 5 years, then we can create that track record. We can create that database of defensibility. Otherwise, we're kind of coming into what's already built, and we can't go backwards and build
right.
that out necessarily.
So good. I really appreciate the, effectively getting ahead of it now for the purpose of when you're looking at this 3 to 5 years from now, maybe even 10 years from now. And here's the thing, maybe your goal is to pass your business down to your children. Again, what you need to be able to sell the business is so often what you need to be able to scale the business, to be able to succeed the business and pass down something. I was in kind of creating the craft and calling community. I really was thinking about my why. And one of those things is, to really build a legacy, you have to have something so tangible, and tangibility comes beyond just the money. It comes in the systems and the operations and the way and manner you all are operating the business. It's not just the customer base that you're buying. It's not just the revenue that you're passing down, but you have to pass down a living, breathing entity that it can exist without the owner, to your point. And then
Right.
to that point of, it's got a strong line of defense so that when the goings get tough, you've got the money in the bank, much less so the operations in place to sustain it and carry it forward.
Yeah, I mean, and it's even the reporting, right? So if you're
Mhm.
reporting to mitigate taxes, your
Yeah.
P&Ls and balance sheet are going to look very different. If you're trying to show growth and value, then you need to showcase that over a period of time, which is not great for taxes, but taxes are a byproduct of profitability. The company is looking at your profitability because that's one metric of how they're going to get their ROI, right?
Right.
And so it's an investment. And like any
Mhm.
investment, there needs to be an ROI. And the
Yeah.
more concern they have around that ROI, the more the discounting starts taking place, right? And that's where the defensibility really comes in, because it's like, no, 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 we have
Right.
years of tracking these metrics. We're not just saying this. We can actually prove this is where we were and this is how far we've come over the last 3 years and where we think we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. There's a track record of it.
One question I have for you, I like that you brought up effectively how you're going to end your year is predicated on the tax side of things and or trying to prove that you're ending the year with a lot of revenue. So here's my question. How is there a line item in the P&L that can effectively be like, hey, look, like we did both. We were spending for the purpose of, just for the purpose of tax savings, but also for the purpose of, look, we're able to kind of pull this line item out and say, like, this is where we kind of housed some of that profit. And this is a consistent line item year over year that you'll see. We can show you exactly the receipts for how we spent it. What are your thoughts there?
So the biggest one, especially in the trades, is a CPA comes over to the owner and says, "Hey, you've had a pretty profitable year this year. Do you need to get any new equipment? Do you need a
Yeah.
new truck? Do you need, I saw your truck out there is looking kind of old, even though it's 2 years old. Do you need a
Yeah.
new?" Right? And so, but those are things that we can adjust and add back when we are normalizing the EBITDA. So it's not a challenge
Mhm.
around that. But when you're looking at, really where that money is best spent, instead of
Mhm.
looking at it from a tax deductible expense, looking at it as a reinvestment in your company to grow your company and be more profitable,
Right.
right? It doesn't always have to be a personal expense. That's great. It's a good tax write-off and you can get away with it. But the idea is that, uh, you know, you're looking at how I can take the profit from our company,
Mm,
invest it back appropriately to get to that next level. But if once again, if you're not tracking any kind
hmm,
of forecasting metrics or any KPIs and you're shoring that up, you're being
right.
tactical versus strategic, then you don't know where to apply that capital. And so the next best thing is I'll get a new truck or I'll do whatever. And look, I'm not a CPA and I'm not trying to give tax advice. What we see commonly is that personal expenses can be added back to your EBITDA and normalized. That's not an issue. What we're saying is there a better place for that capital to go inside your business to get you to that next level, to get you to that growth objective that you've set for yourself? And if it is, that would be a much better place to apply because there's an ROI versus a tax deduction. And that's really all we're saying.
So good. I love that perspective. I mean, it's a total perspective shift. It's the
Yes.
mind. You said a mindset of strength, defensibility, and values. It's a mindset at the end of the day. It's not just cutting corners to try to save a buck on taxes, but we are looking to grow and scale this business. And what are the best ways to do that? I mean, even just, I was on a call with one of our clients and we're investing in a $14,000 technology piece of software to help with business development. And I'm super excited about it. And yes, that's going to be a tax. It's an opportunity to put our revenue somewhere, right? To spend
Right.
some money. But at the same time, it's going to probably yield some tremendous gains. And so I just love that conversation beyond just, and here's the problem with CPAs in general, right? This is just a general issue, is that if they're not industry specific, if they're not in a niche and they're just CPA across the board, it's going to be hard for them to know those nuances of, oh, by the way, have you heard about this new technology or this new software, this new AI, opportunity to really streamline your workflow of customer communication? They're not able to be specific beyond, what about getting a new truck?
Right. Yep.
Their recommendations are limited, which is where Bennett, I just love that you guys are so focused on the trades. You guys aren't just like end all be all, we help businesses exit, but it's like we do this for the trades in such a powerful way. So I'm excited about all the things that you've learned across the way, throughout over the last couple of years. And you've come from a family in the trades.
Yeah, we had a third generation company that recently sold back in June. It was an 80-year-old company.
Wow.
And, it was one of those things that it was interesting to be on the other side of the table, being
Yeah.
the seller and not necessarily just representing the seller and
Mhm.
understanding the emotional side of it. My dad was 85, is 85, and he was still worried about what was he going to do after he sold the company, right? And so that's the other side of this equation that we have to solve is you have worked probably 60, 70, 80 hours a week
Yeah.
for decades. Where do you put that energy once
Right.
that company
Exactly.
sells? So what is your purpose, right? What are you putting your energy into that's going to give you the same satisfaction and joy that growing your company gave you? It's
Mhm.
not the finances. Because once you get that check, that's great for a little while. But we're
Right.
talking in some cases 30, 40 years of retirement that,
Absolutely.
okay, great, you're financially secure. What are you gonna do? What's gonna give you purpose
Yes.
after that? And 75% of people who sell their company regret that decision within 12 months after the sale.
Wow.
And a lot of it is because it's that tied identity to the company in the community. Oh, that's Joe Smith. He's the owner of so and so company, right? And they
Yes.
like it. It's an ego trip, right? We all like being recognized for what we do, and especially if it's a great company in the community, yeah,
Right.
that it feels good about that. But
Mhm.
you have to be intentional. Once again, that word's going to keep coming up. You have to be intentional about what your next chapter looks like. And we
Mm.
work with a lot of professionals to help owners really walk through that process. Once again, if we have the time to do it years in advance, so they're excited about
Yeah.
that next chapter and not just looking at the money to fill that void. because it's not going to happen.
So good. It's effectively, to your point, intentional. It's being proactive with your life.
Yes.
Rather than being reactive of, oh, this is such a good opportunity. I guess I'm old and what are you going to do in the latter half of your life? And even latter third, one of our clients, he's run the business and his wife says, you gave the business your first half of your life. I want the second half. And that's hard, but he also knew it was coming. So how do you be a good steward of the relationships in your life so that when you do have the extra time, I think that that's another reason why we are experiencing so many divorces, is because they're not really spending time with their spouse until they sell the company, they exit, they retire, whatever, they've got time. And then they're like, oh, who are you, stranger? And so there's things we can be doing in being proactive, looking at the horizon, saying 5-10 years from now, even 3 years from now, I anticipate having a lot more time on my hands. How do I cultivate the health and integrity of my relationships so that when I do have the time and space, I'm not squaring off with the person in the mirror that I hate and despise because I never cultivated that person, whether it's myself looking in the mirror or looking at my partner.
Well, and I think it's also, when we bring in a professional to kind of start this project, we bring in the spouses, we bring in the kids, right? Because
that.
How do they see it? Do they have anxiety or anticipation around this? Are they, really looking at this from one perspective and it hasn't really been communicated? The trades are tough. It's hands-on, hard work. It is a certain type of person that goes into this business. And so these are not typically people who are really vulnerable in discussing the emotional side of where they are in life. And I think it takes a certain type of professional to break that down. But it also takes a certain type of owner to really want to work through that so that they can see this successful all the way through every aspect of their life, not just financially.
So good. I love that advice, Bennett. And I'm curious, when we're going to that third, you said having a mindset and preparing the business for one that's strong. You said strength, defensibility, and value, really understanding the value that you bring. I think that having those conversations with the whole family, and a whole management team too. Do you all engage with the whole management team as well when you guys are having these conversations, or not really?
It depends on the owner. Look, there's strength in that, but there's also some opportunity for people to kind of look at it as, I don't know what my future looks like. And so we will lean on the owner to really tell us what they want to do and how they want to get their management involved. At the end of the day, when they go through due diligence, they're going to have to bring in the C-suite, especially the CFO. Because somebody's coming in and asking all these questions. One of the beauty of working with us is that because we're working with the management all the way through and we're really trying to enhance the efficiency of the company and look at forecasting models, we are working hand in hand with that C-suite all the way through. And we're also capturing all of that data and we're building out the data room, right? So when a buyer's coming in, our goal is to reduce due diligence by half because we have all of the documentation already in place. We know it's vetted. We know it's revised in a way that a buyer would want to look at it. It makes due diligence run a lot smoother. And so they're not constantly going to the management to really dig in. Because that's going to have to be done. Otherwise, it's going to fall on the owner. And then the owner's going to have to go in and really try to source all these documents while they're trying to run a business.
Yeah.
It's a very, very heavy toll it takes. And, look, some PEs play that game. They know it's going to be emotionally hard for the owner. And so they just wear them down. So when it gets time to sell, not every PE, right? There's some good PEs out there, but that is kind of the old school tactic of wear them down emotionally, get them to the point where they're just ready to sell, get done with the process.
So sad.
It is sad, but it's because the sellers never had somebody to represent them and defend them and stand for them and vet those conversations. And that's the other side of the defensibility. That's why we want to get involved.
So good. So good. I've never thought of it in that way, but yeah, it's like you guys really come in and protect them. Because
Yes.
especially when your identity is wrapped up in it, if private equity is coming in and seeing gaps we've never taken the time to see, they're doing the due diligence and they're looking and it's what's being uncovered isn't necessarily the most attractive, and then they're trying to cheapen your business. That is such an ego punch. So it's like there's so many different angles of how it's hard and dangerous to do this by yourself. So I really love that perspective.
Well, and it's also who is the right type of buyer for you, right?
Mm,
Because there's so many different ways you can go about it. You talked about that kind of intergenerational transfer, which is
mhm.
great, but how many stories have you heard about the founding generation having to come back in because Gen 2
Yes.
was about to sink the ship, and Gen 1 had to come back in and
Yeah.
actually write it again to basically
Mhm.
protect their sale proceeds, but
Mhm.
also make sure that the company was in a place that they, could survive another generation. They
Right.
didn't do a good job of that intentionally, before that transfer. They just kind of handed it off in hopes that it was the best way to go about it. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes the business is not the legacy, right?
Mm.
Sometimes having that financial flexibility and freedom to do something
Absolutely.
that, is more in alignment with that Gen 2, Gen 3, to really be able to facilitate maybe some passions that they have. That
So
can be the legacy, right? Doing things that,
mhm.
everybody is emotionally in tune with and passionate about versus something
Mhm.
that they feel they have a responsibility to continue that legacy, and that's a lot of weight.
That's such a way. And Bennett, I just want to thank you because the ability that you're bringing to this conversation surrounding emotional intelligence here is, I mean, that's a core value for us, and not a lot of folks talk about that, and much less even have the tools to be able to navigate the emotional challenge that is faced when it comes to something to which our identity is tied.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that, and I think that that alone gives a leg up. And hey, we're going to come in and we're going to understand, we're going to get to know you on that personal level so that we can best represent you. It's kind of like if you're in the court of law and you don't have a lawyer who really understands you and knows why you're doing what you're doing, and understands all the context, it's like this is a dangerous situation. And so it's better to have, I mean, what you guys offer, it's just really, it's really, really incredible. And the emotional intelligence piece is so critical to include. And Bennett, for you, your family was, you said you and your brothers were owners of the business, not super involved, but when it came to selling the business, that's really where you kind of were able to shine, so to say, and really help the business. What were some of the things that you were able to contribute to that selling process?
Yeah, so we had stagnant growth for, God, probably a decade. I mean, just kind of the COLA increase of, price increases and things like that that really showed on the bottom line of the P&L, but there was really no organic growth taking place. And COVID hit, and we took a back seat. It was something that, affected us tremendously. My dad was 80 at the time, and we kind of started looking at like, okay, third generation's not coming in here. We don't really have a buyer immediately to come in and look at this business. And so we needed to understand where some of the gaps were. And we had a manufacturer that we worked with, that we had kind of gone back and forth over the decades of looking to buy them out. They were our sole producer and, of the goods that we sold. And then also it was a one-off relationship. And
Mm.
so after COVID, he was like, I'm out. I'm done. And he wasn't going to transfer it out to any previous generation or post
Oh, he was just
generation.
going to shut his doors.
Yeah, and so it was gonna immediately affect us, which was once again a blind spot
Yeah.
that, we were able to really turn 180 degrees into a value asset. And so we were a company that really never carried debt. My dad never believed in debt. We didn't have a great banking relationship, with our bank, and so when we needed some help, there wasn't really anybody to help us out. The
Wow.
irony is that the idle loan was out, right, through COVID, and when we looked at a new manufacturer, they needed $1 million of backstop. Well, the bank wasn't gonna loan that money,
Wow.
and we weren't going to necessarily take the cash flow and put towards that. So we needed to figure out another option. I was able to kind of talk my dad into taking the idle loan. We were able to get the full 2 million, apply
Good.
that to the $1 million of backstock. And then that immediately doubled our EBITDA the following year.
Wow.
So because of that, our EBITDA caused us to go into a new tier, and we were really able to leverage that, which got us much closer to that ideal exit value. But
Nice.
the irony in all this is that when we went to the marketplace to look at buyers, we had a $16 million delta between the lowest bid and the highest bid.
Wow.
And that was a situation of making sure you understand the buyer, right? And who is actually looking to buy your company, because they're going to value you based on what they can extract out of your company to get an ROI.
Right.
So at the bottom, they looked at it one way, and at the top, they looked at it another way. And
Wow.
so all of these things really play into that. And so being able to really kind of talk through with my brothers and my dad, it really created an opportunity to leverage a lot of what we've learned along the way and enhancing our ability to go to market and really extract the full value out of the company.
So good. Well, and honestly, I mean, it's a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to being able to consider the value of your business. Are there easy product lines that we could potentially incorporate, or even just building out that kind of that second arm of the company? That was one of the things. One of our clients, I was chief marketing officer for them, and they were kind of quietly in the background being assessed by a private equity, but they had created a whole production side as it pertains to the services, or the actual what do you call it? The actual services that they produced, what we're actually going in and laying down in terms of the actual product itself. It's not just that we're not just no longer a service company, but we're a manufacturer. That completely changes it. And so once they had the product line, in addition to additional service lines, that completely changes the bottom line, because now it's not just, oh, we're a one company and we also have the product, but this product itself, now we can service it out to so many other companies. It's like the potential for scale is massive, because yes, you're buying one business under one umbrella, but because you have the product itself, now you can sell that to multiple businesses. So I love that
Justification.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we're not just, maybe it even allows for you to move beyond just B2C, business to consumer, where we have a home service, but now we have the product for B2B in addition to supplementing ourselves. So now our cost of goods is going down way lower because we're actually manufacturing the product.
Well, and I think understanding who your potential buyers are helps us understand what levers to pull when we're trying to shore that out, because a strategic buyer is going to look at your business very differently than a PE that's looking for a tuck-in or a roll-up into a platform company they have. So you have to understand what are the metrics that they're going to look at. And if we understand that a buyer is going to look at a certain set of KPIs and metrics for the valuation, then we need to be able to kind of focus our energies on that. PE doesn't want to run the day-to-day, right? You're probably not even going to be rebranded unless you're a tuck-in, and then they're just going to, but that's a smaller company they're typically doing that with. But if it is a larger company that is just going to be a roll-up into their portco, what we want to be able to do is say, you need to work on your middle management, your C-suite, making sure that operations run as smoothly today as the day that you sell. And with that, that's going to enhance your value, right? If you're going in there day in and day out and really working in the business instead of on the business, which everybody's heard of, then it's going to be a situation where there could be long-term potential earnouts, and earnouts don't have a great track record of really fulfilling that entire obligation. So earnouts, most people don't really understand. They think that most sellers think that they're going to get a fat check at the end of the closing and they're going to be done. Well, that's great if you can showcase exactly how the future growth of your company is going to play out and you have a track record. Those
Right.
earnings get really easy to kind of negotiate. But if you don't, the buyer's going to always leverage those earnouts on their side because they're
Mm,
concerned that what you've told them is going to take place is not actually going to take place. And so those earnouts really don't get paid out a lot. I think
mm,
last year the stat was 24%, 24 cents on every dollar actually got paid out last year for an earnout.
wow.
So, if you want to put all your eggs in that basket and hope that you're going to get that 100% earnout, it's not always going to take place. And so that looks very different than a strategic buyer is going to come in and they're pretty much going to rebrand you. They probably have a centralized management company that's got a CFO that's going to run all the financials for all their companies.
Yeah.
They got a CEO that's kind of looking over everything. Maybe there'll be a president in each location or a general manager, but it's different. It's just a different setup. And so what you got to look at is market saturation, market capacity, looking at those TAMs and SAMs, which is your world of marketing, and really understanding what that would look like for a strategic buyer coming in who's looking to get into your marketplace.
Right.
Saturate that. That's a different process than somebody who's looking at a PE who's just really wanting the revenue and the profit.
So good. Bennett, thank you so, so, so much. This has been such an invaluable conversation. And I'm curious if there's anything else that you'd want to share that I did not ask.
I think just my parting comment would be control your own destiny. Put the
Mm,
work in now. Don't leave it to chance. You've worked way too long and too hard to
mm,
just leave your company to chance to sell. Control it. You can do that, but it's going to take some intentionality. It's going to take some time and it's going to take some capital. But if it's not Pando, there's other companies who can help you do that.
right.
And I think just give yourself that best opportunity. You said you may not sell the business, but the reality is you're either going to leave your business boots up or boots down. And you need to plan for that inevitability
Mm,
and really control your own narrative around how you're going to exit.
good. Bennett, thank you so, so, so much. How can people learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can go on to www.pando, P-A-N-D-O, consultinggroup.com. That's our website. We have a contact form. I'm also on LinkedIn. And we would love to have a conversation. We're here to help educate. We're not trying to sell any service or process. We just really want to help educate around the realities of going to market. And if in that process we can help you out, we would be more than happy to do that.
Good. Love it. Y'all do that. Even just to have the conversation, it's never too early to vision out where you're going. And it's never too early to get yourself organized. Exit ready really just means you're also ready to scale. So this is worth it regardless of where you're going to take the company. So if you're not sure, even having these conversations with an outsider, it's really hard sometimes to dedicate the time and space, much less so really know how to navigate the conversation of what do I even want in the first place. So being able to engage with someone who helps, because you said 70 to 80% don't actually sell. So you might have the desire to initially, and maybe you find out that you don't, or vice versa. Maybe you actually do want to at the end of the day. So it's a worthy conversation to have. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us on the Craft and Calling. Bennett, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate it.